Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to a discussion of philosophy of food. And as we did last time in the last module, we are going to return to the very end of Pollan's book, In Defense of Food. So, if you remember from last time, we looked at the chapter called Escape from the Western Diet and Eat Food, Food Defined. So in this lecture, we're going to finish the discussion in defense of food with the chapter titled Mostly Plants, What to Eat, and Not Too Much, How to Eat. So one of the reasons why we're kind of ending things by looking at Pollan's conclusion of his book is because this is where we get sort of his positive take on how to approach food in your daily go of things, right? It's sort of as much as we might consider it, it can be thought of as a normative account. Here's where Pollan's telling us what we should do. How should we think about food? What should we specifically eat? What should we avoid eating? He gives us some rules in order to think about our daily diets. And if you remember from the beginning of the semester, this term diet really means a kind of a way of life, a way of living. And so that's what Pollan is doing here. He's prescribing rather than describing a way of living. And I want to kind of conclude things by considering what he says here. And then in the next video, we're going to consider some objections. And notice that this is something that I've not really done so far throughout the semester. I haven't really offered any specific objections to what Pollan claims, but now I want to do that. I want to make sure, since this is a philosophy class, I want to make sure that we can think critically about what exactly Pollan is arguing for. What exactly is the normative account that Pollan is after here? And we should think about whether or not that particular normative account makes any sense, if there's maybe some holes in it. So that's what we'll do in the next video. But for right now, let's just get into the last two chapters here. Now, keep in mind, as you've seen a few times throughout the semester, Pollan gives us this kind of catchphrase or a bumper sticker kind of slogan where he says, eat food, mostly plants, not too much. And we saw last time what he actually means by eat food. He means eat whole foods, right? He's thinking about eating what your grandmother would have offered or what your great grandmother or grandfather might have prepared for you. So, in today's lecture, we're thinking about this chapter mostly plants, what to eat, and not too much how to eat, right? So, these chapters are where Pollan shifts from that diagnostic way of approaching things. As you recall, he spends most of the time in this book criticizing what he calls nutritionism, and more specifically, the Western industrial diet. So let's start there. Let's start with this idea that we should eat mostly plants. Here, Pollan's central claim is very simple. The best human diet is based primarily on whole foods, minimally processed plants. Right? He frames this as a kind of return to eating the foods that our grandparents would have eaten, what they would have recognized as real foods. And keep in mind that this is not supposed to be mere nostalgia, right? It's not nostalgia for its own sake. Rather, for Pollan, this is traditional eating. This is a traditional pattern that has evolved over time and through experience, through culture, through ecological adaptations. And meanwhile, many of the foods that we find in the supermarket, which has been engineered primarily for shelf life and convenience, and specifically for profit, these are not healthy foods. These are not foods that are good for us. And so when he says eat foods, what he means is to eat real foods, things made of recognizable ingredients, not things that are produced for long shelf lives and so forth. But he also wants us to avoid highly processed foods or what we might call like pseudo foods. He points out that many of the supermarket products are designed to mimic foods, things like cheese products or fruit drinks or items with all kinds of different preservatives and additives. These are engineered to be hyper palatable and inexpensive, but they detach us from the kind of traditional nutritional and cultural roles that real food is supposed to play, specifically plants. right? Plants should be the foundation of what's on your plate, according to Pollan, right? Not necessarily for any kind of a moral or environmental reason, though he does acknowledge both of these, but rather it's because plant-based diets correlate strongly with better health outcomes. They correlate with lower rates of chronic disease, lower inflammation, and more dietary fibers. And he also recognizes that diversity matters, right? So it's not eating just one thing, but having an array of different plant-based foods on our table, right? So diversity matters a lot, according to Pollan. He emphasizes eating a range of different plant species, and that will help us to allow to increase nutritional quality, which will then also prevent us from falling into various nutrient deficiencies. So when we're thinking about foods, the foods that we eat, we should think about what foods are closer to us, what foods are coming directly from the local farm rather than from some factory that's shipped through Cisco. And we should be thinking about whether they're organic or conventionally grown. So again, the main message here in this chapter, Pollan is trying to get at is that eating well is not simply about obsessing over individual nutrients like carbs, fats, vitamins, and so forth. Rather, it's about choosing the right kinds of foods, specifically plants. That's the foundation that he's aiming at here. Now, in the next chapter, he prescribes that we limit how much we eat. And I think he has a really great point here. One thing that we can talk about, and I'll include a video here too, is the amount of food that Americans eat is just far too much. Instead, we should be thinking about things like a fist, right? Like a fist is not a very big thing, but that might be like all that we really need to eat rather than some massive bowl of pasta, right? In this chapter, Pollan is moving away from specifically what we eat to how we eat and how much we eat. His argument here is that eating is not simply a biological act. Rather, we should think about in terms of culture, right? So we shouldn't be eating alone. We should not be eating on the go. We should not be eating really quickly or in front of the TV or with the phones in front of our faces or mindlessly just snacking. And when we do that, we lose track of how much we eat. And this kind of disconnects us from the practices that historically have kept us from overeating, kept us from eating too much. So what he does is he offers several practical rules. We should pay more and we should eat less. Pollan argues that food should cost us more. And these are not, according to Pollan, for elitist reasons. He tries to insist that it's actually because when food is cheap, that's when it's no good for us. We tend to consume mindlessly in excess cheap junk food. But when we spend more, we're typically buying higher quality foods that are more satisfying and more nutrient dense. And this discourages us from overeating, right? So we should spend more, we should eat less, right? So rather than eating a whole bag of potato chips, we should think about having a single fist size serving of whatever it is, probably some kind of plants rather than potato chips. And we should eat meals, according to Pollan. Meals are important because they are a kind of a structured event that begins and then ends. Whereas snacking while watching Netflix, it doesn't ever begin and it never ever really ends. In fact, you might even continue to snack as you go to bed that night. We're kind of like grazing through the day, which often leads to eating more and more calories without even really realizing it. And again, don't eat alone, right? We should eat with others. And when we eat with others, we should slow down and we should engage socially with others. We should do this in a kind of communal sense, which reinforces these cultural norms that have historically prevented the kind of overindulgence that seems to plague the way Americans approach food. We should eat at a table rather than on a couch. We should eat at a table rather than in the car or at our desk. right? So Pollan is claiming here that eating in the car or in front of a television, this disrupts our ability to notice when we are actually satisfied. When we have a screen in front of our face, then that interferes with the right kind of the satisfactory signals that are happening in our brains, right? Because too many things are happening, and the junk food that's going in is really no different than the junk information on the screen that's going in. And so it's all kind of happening at the same time. Whereas when you sit down without a screen, without the TV, with your friends and your family at a table, and you can sort of embrace the cultural aspect of sharing a communal meal, this helps us to recognize when we're full, when we're satisfied. Indeed, we should stop eating before we're full. In fact, I think this is one of Pollan's more interesting points here. What he's getting at is we should be aiming at eating until we're around, say, like 80% full. Indeed, this is grounded in the very idea that your body is sending you signals that it's satisfied, that there's a kind of a lag between actual consumption and when your body is recognizing this for you, right? So by the very time that you feel full, you've already overeaten, and so that means that we should try to eat until we're about 80% full, so that way that lag time is compensated for. We should also cook our own meals. In fact, cooking forces us to slow down. It forces us to take responsibility for what we eat, to eat small amounts, maybe a finger size sort of helping, or a fist size sort of helping, rather than the massive bowls that we get at a restaurant, or some foot long sandwich that we don't really need. So when we slow down, we take responsibility for what we're eating, we're able to engage with food as something that we're going to participate in rather than passively consume as we're watching Netflix. Indeed, one of the key points that Pollan is making here is that when we allow corporations to do most of the cooking for us, that actually optimizes profit for them and decreases health for us. And you might think that that's really quite absurd. We have an industry that literally makes more money off of our suffering, right? The worse we are health wise, the better they are monetarily speaking. And there's something weird and sort of morally absurd about that. So we should try to make eating a kind of mindful, intentional act. We should be thinking about eating as something deliberate, something we're paying attention to, not as mere background activity that we do while we're focused on something else. Indeed, for Pollan, how we eat influences how much we eat. And you might think that this matters as much as the content of the food itself, right? So eating slowly, socially, attentively, with intention, this creates natural checks on overconsumption. And arguably, then this will help restore a kind of healthier relationship that we'll have to food itself. And again, thinking about diet in terms of a way of living, a way of expressing your life, rather than merely the nutrients that you're taking in. So now that we've spent all this time talking about Pollan's approach to nutritionism and how he really wants to think about food in terms of a connection to our rich and long history and culture, now that we've done that, I want to kind of turn to the objections that I mentioned we're going to consider. So what we're going to do in the next video is we're going to think about Pollan's view in more detail, insofar as it has a number of significant objections. There may be really important questions and objections about whether his critique of nutrition science is fair, whether his prescriptions and normative approach to food is actually realistic for people living in a modern food system like our own. And so now that we've considered what his actual view is, his positive account, now let's move on to importantly, consider some objections for his account. So that's what we'll do next.